വർണ്ണമേകിയും നമ്മിൽ വാഴുമതിനാമം ഇന്നും വാഴ്ത്തിടാം. ഞങ്ങൾ പാടുമീ സ്വരങ്ങൾ കീർത്തനങ്ങളാകണേ. ചൂടുവയ്ക്കുമീ പദങ്ങൾ നൃത്തലോലമാകണേ. കുഞ്ഞു വീടിനുൾത്തളങ്ങൾ ധന്യമാകണേ. അമ്മ നൽകുമുമ്മ പോലും അമൃതമാകണേ. പൂർണ്ണമീ ചരാചരങ്ങൾ ഗുരുവരങ്ങളാകണേ. ഹൃദയരാഗതന്ത്രി മീട്ടി സ്നേഹഗീതമേകിയും കർമ്മഭൂമി തളിരിടുന്ന വർണ്ണമേകിയും നമ്മിൽ വാഴുമതിനാമം ഇന്നും വാഴ്ത്തിടാം.
I head of North Department to Murali for the welcome speech.
Thank you, Parvati. Good evening to all. Respected Dr. Harilal, my dear colleagues and dear students. So this is the second induction program for our freshers. And as you know, the basic objective is to connect you to the real charm of our discipline. In fact, the very word microeconomics creates a very comfortable feeling. For about 5 years, the University of Kerala had experimented with another paper, another course, Methodology and Perspectives of Social Sciences, in the first semester. But then the majority of the students and even some teachers had a feeling that they were in an enemy territory or in an enemy camp. Because for many, beginning economics means beginning with microeconomics. So fortunately for the present 2 batches, we have microeconomics in the first 2 semesters. And in the first semester, we have foundations of microeconomics, and then we have intermediate microeconomics in the second semester. Of course, you have 2 excellent teachers to assist you in the discovery of microeconomics. But as you know, we have to go beyond the mandatory confines of our course. And then you will begin to know the offshoots of microeconomics and the real charm of microeconomics. And this is a branch from which even its critics could not just dismiss its basis. Today we have a very eminent academic, Dr. Harilal M.S. Despite his very busy academic schedules, he is here for our chosen mission. On behalf of all members of the PG Department of Economics and Research Center, Government College for Women, I welcome Dr. Harilal. Appreciating the very sincere efforts of my colleagues Rejith in organizing this session, and also thanking my colleagues Ganasree and Janaky for their wholehearted support, I welcome both of them. And welcome to all participants. So dear children, welcome to your own opportunities for knowing economics. Thank you. And Ganasree will be introducing the resource person and also the theme.
Thank you, ma'am. I invite Ganasree ma'am for the introductory remarks.
Thank you. Hope I am audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good evening, one and all. Respected Chief Guest of the day, Dr. Harilal M.S, Head of the Department, Dr.Umajyothi V, other faculties, and my dear students. To excel in any field, we need to have a perfect start. A firm footing is inevitable to reach out to the horizon. Microeconomics is the entry point to the world of economics. Microeconomic theory is perhaps the most important course in all economics and business programs. It covers traditional theory as well as some exciting new theoretical developments like behavioral economics, experimental economics, economics of information, and the like. The theory serves as the basis for most applied fields of economics. It also has an international dimension which reflects the globalization of production and distribution in today's world. In the 3-year graduation program, you may come across different courses in economics, but micro will remain as the pillar. Initial momentum is very important as it determines the distance you can cover. To equip you all to attain the maximum range, and that also in greater depth and quality, we have with us an eminent scholar in this field, Dr. Harilal Madhavan sir. He is a development economist presently working as ad-hoc faculty in the Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, Trivandrum. He has been part of various organizations, universities, and research institutes, including European Research Council, Austrian Academy of Sciences, Vienna, and Center for Research in Science, Paris, to name a few. He has a lot of publications to his credit and commendable academic achievements, including 2 postdoc fellowships and Best PhD Paper Award. I must say that the Department of Economics, Government College for Women is gifted to have a very versatile guest with us who can tilt you to the correct angle so that you will be able to explore the subject in its entirety. Wishing you all a very enriching session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Here is the moment that we have been waiting for. Today, we have with us Dr. Harilal Madhavan sir. He is a development economist specialized in economic and interdisciplinary research on Asian indigenous medicines, health and pharmaceutical policies. With much love and respect, I welcome you, sir, to have a few words.
Thank you so much. You can hear me and see me. Is it okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Umajyothi and everybody. It's actually, Rejith has invited me to talk to the students. I'm very happy to do that because I'm also teaching here in the IISER, the BSMS students, the science graduate students. For them, economics is not a major paper. For them, along with the major science courses, it's one of the optional papers they have. So I'm teaching here, intermittently on microeconomics, development economics, and some bit of sociology, economic sociology, and things like that, very interdisciplinary kind of papers. So I think this is a very interesting opportunity to talk back to the economic students again, because in my previous academic venture, I was in Asim Premji University in Bangalore, where I was teaching with the basic development economics and experimental economics. So so I had the opportunity to talk to various realm of students where they receive economics in a very different ways and passion. So I'm very happy to be here, and I hope this is a very informal session that we are going to have for next 45-50 minutes. So I'm not going to get into very very complex area of economics, but just to introduce many of you into the very basics of economics. Probably I'm planning to present here some of the very interesting basic issues that we need to really be careful. I mean, I'm sure you must have gone through many of these things when you have done your plus two courses, right? I mean, I'm sure you must have done a paper on economics during your plus two. Can some of you switch on your mics and respond to me? It would be great if you can actually respond to me, because I have a feeling that somebody is there. I really don't like this online platforms. Thank you so much, Aparna.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, Nikita, yes. So you have done some economics. So I hope these things are quite familiar to you. I'm kind of reintroducing many of these things. Um, so can I just give a small presentation here? Um, because that will make things easier for you, because then only looking at me and listening to me. Okay. So let me know if you can see this. Are you able to see this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So studying economics, economics is becoming one of the important aspect of. I mean, if you look at the science institutes like IISER, if you look at the engineering institutes like the top engineering institutes like IITs, you see that the Department of Economics is quite relevant, right? I mean, it's a major part of the humanities and social science departments, and economics remain as probably one of the best paid professional area so far. I mean, if you look at the, I'm sure you must be scrolling through different universities and departments to look at what they teach there, and everywhere the basic understanding of economics is always there. Okay, so I hope even if you have willfully chosen this topic, discipline as economics, or you have accidentally landed here, I'm sure both of you would, I mean, both categories would be happy when you go along with further learnings from different teachers there in various fields of economics. So I hope you would be keeping the enthusiasm when you work on it. Okay, so I'm just trying to give you some interesting, probably some kind of raise your curiosity to understand economics. Okay, so economics, I love this definition of Marshall in 1890. He talks about the study of mankind in the ordinary business of life. Okay? I mean, usually we know the quite different definitions in economics. I'm not going to very stereotypic economic definitions here, but just trying to understand what kind of sense we are making out of economics here. Okay? So economics is the study of mankind. It's basically, most of the subjects like anthropology, sociology, or any other disciplines. This also looks at human behavior. Okay? In the ordinary business of life, I mean, everyday life, how do you deal with various issues? Probably, with a different eye, from a perception of economics, or perception of looking at it from a very rational point of view. How do you look at various concerns that relates to your economic life? So Marshall has put in it bluntly in a very, very, very simple format. So I think economics is important because of three things. So it helps you to understand the world you live better. You must be thinking about why some people are really paid a lot in their profession. So why some movie stars are actually, film stars are really paid high. Why in some countries inflation is so high. What is inflation? Inflation is basically the price level. Price level is so high. So why its price is actually increasing quite a lot. Why the money, for example, if you look at the currency, for example, in some countries, when you convert the dollar into their own currencies, you might see that it's quite disproportional, right? It's quite varied. I mean, you might be seeing that the dollar money ratio has been going up or down and things like that. It talks about depreciation, appreciation, and all, or devaluation, things like that. You must have heard about it. So probably in some countries like Zimbabwe, you have to go with a sack to the ATMs to collect Zimbabwean money in terms of dollar. Because I have an experience when I was in Mongolia. If you can try to convert $1 into a Mongolian ronut, it will be around 2,500 ronuts. It's quite a lot of knots, right? So, but in some other currencies, it's not that much, right? So why this kind of discrepancy, this disparity in terms of the dollar money ratio or dollar currency ratio in their own different countries? Or why some phones are costlier than others? Why iPhone is costing much than the Samsung Galaxy or something like Realme or something like that, right? So you can actually think about this. This is actually everyday life that you're thinking of. So why this is important? And then in another way, we can think about economic decisions you have to make in everyday life. You actually think about, various theories of economics, unknowingly. For example, when you selected for first year, I think you're the first year BA economics. So you must have actually put your preferences in different places. Some of you have put your first preference in women's college. Some of you are not, right? You kind of ended up there. You might have preferred somewhere else. But that decision of studying economics, also a kind of decision that you think about. Why did you go for something like a job? Why do you want to do a kind of graduation? So that is an economic decision that you take to study or work. That kind of decision. What price I should charge for my product? If you're an entrepreneur, if you're actually starting a company, how do you price your product? Okay. How do you really say that this is the cost that I involved in producing this product, and how much you charge for that particular unit of product? Is it equal to your cost, or more than your cost, more than the cost, or more than it's a kind of profit maximizing cost or price, something like that? So there are various economic decisions also you make, and to understand the policies better in other way. For example, you must be knowing that there are different types of taxation, progressive taxation, and different types of taxation we have, right? If you have more income, you'll be taxed more. That's kind of progressive taxation. And in budget, you see in different governments are actually taxing different products differently. You must have noticed that, right? In every budget, you must have noticed that the liquor or the cigarettes taxes going up sometime, right? Why the government is choosing this particular products for increasing taxation? And we are also having discussion nowadays on whether KIFBI is good or not, right? We can have budget finance and deficit financing. Deficit financing is can you actually spend more than what you have? Is it possible? And is it actually ethical or economical to do that? Can we do a kind of spending outside from our budget? There are a lot of policy things to involve in it, and something like a simple thing like, why do you trade between different countries? Why do you involve in trade? Is it that quite relevant for economics? So these kind of all, whether it is everyday economics or it's a policy making, or is it something about the decision about you? This is, economics is coming into picture. So economics is something very important in everyday life. That's why I like this definition of Alfred Marshall, where you actually look at ordinary business of life. How we are studying those kind of decisions that will tell us economics. Okay? But if you go into very professional kind of definition, I think Lionel Robbins is one who has given us the definition of looking at scarcity and wants. Okay, the unlimited wants and limited resources. The idea of unlimited wants and limited resources. I'm sure if there is no limitation in resources, that whatever you want you can get. It's a kind of free thing that everything is available easily, and whatever you want you can go and get it in the market or anywhere. So then there is no subject called economics. Then there is no use of that, right? Here, the problem comes from precisely this particular point. Premise is the scarcity and trade-off. Okay, I'll come to trade-off later. But scarcity, what is scarcity? Scarcity refers to our limited resources and our unlimited wants and needs. That's a problem. So we have unlimited wants. We call in another way, when you actually deal with some further economics, you will learn that non-satiety. Like, the people demand more and more. They would love to have more and more things, right? That's a basic premise in which we actually think about economics. A rational man who always want to have more and more. Okay, so unlimited wants we have. So when you have unlimited wants, whether you can satisfy all these unlimited wants with the given resources, how do you do that? Okay, so for an individual this is true. For a country this is true. For an individual, resources may include time, money, and skill. Okay, how do you utilize your time at the best? Efficiently, how do you utilize? The efficiency, the term is very important. That I'll come to talk about later, very soon. Okay? The time, the money, and skill. How do you utilize your skill, your capacity, your thinking capacity or your ability to understand things in a better way so that you can achieve something better. Okay, I mean, for a country, this is something more beyond it. So limited resources include natural resources, capital, labor force, and technology. I'm sure in the I'm not going to explain it, but you must be knowing that the factors of production that we use in the production process, that for every country, right? Right. Like you have land, capital, labor force, and entrepreneurship, right? So we actually make use of the important three factors of production, and the entrepreneur will actually organize the production process. So for a country, how do you actually make use of these resources? That's important. For an individual, actually it is something else. So you also have to make a distinction between what is scarcity and shortage here. You know, scarcity is not equal to shortage. Shortage is probably a temporary or slightly long-term phenomenon where producers will not or cannot offer or serve goods or services at the current prices. Sometimes it remains for some time. That there is a shortage of food for some time, right? There's a shortage of finance for some time. You don't get loans. So it's something like a temporary kind of or phenomenon, shortage. But scarcity is there always because our needs and wants are always kind of mismatching. I hope you understand this. This is the basic premise in which we understand economics. Economics is all about understanding this relation between scarcity and unlimited wants and limited resources. So that's why we call it scarce resources. Okay, and so when there is a scarcity in resources, we actually go into make a choice between the two. How do we actually make choice between different resources available? How make a country make a choice between different resources? Produce a good or to utilize in the production process. When you talk about utilizing the production process, whether you choose more of labor or more of capital or something like that. When you think about production process, you think about what to produce. So I'll come to that. So I'm coming here. So there is three fundamental questions in that sense that every economy faces. Okay, so I'm sure you must have learned this, but I'm trying to put it again to understand this. So if you look at microeconomics or macroeconomics or any other field of economics, the ultimate goal we should not forget. Any economic sciences is actually trying to improve the living conditions of the people in their everyday lives. Okay, so that is the basic idea by which we work. Even if we are dealing with the scarce resources and things like that, we are actually looking at how to improve the living condition of the people. That's a basic thing. That's a bottom line. Okay, and now what are the fundamental questions that we actually face here? What goods and services to be produced in a country, right? Whether to produce, more of agricultural commodities or more of industry, or where do we invest more? Okay, so that's a concern. And second thing, how to produce it? How do we make this production process done? Whether we use more labor or more capital. In India, you know that we have abundance of labor, so we can use more of labor. So if you use more labor, then is there a problem that efficiency will be less? The country has to think about it. And very importantly, the third question is who get this? And that's a problem of distribution. So how to produce, when you talk about how to produce, it's basically the combination of inputs. You should not forget. That's how do you mix the different inputs that is available to you? That means actually it's a technology of production. What kind of technology that we use in the production process? So how to produce is actually talking about the technology. Okay, because this is really, really important when you deal with development economics. Because if you look at the theories of development economics, you might see that the initial discussion of Marx and Adam Smith, the father of economics, and Marx, and everybody has been dealing with the capital and labor, the two important factors of production. Okay, and for a long time we have been thinking that these are the factors of production that decides the production process. Okay? That actually contributes to the production process and contributes to the wealth of the country. But after a long time, we understood that probably there is something new. If you look at the Cobb-Douglas production function, you will learn later. You see that there is a that is appearing in X, apart from the labor and capital. What is this A? That is an extra term that appears here, and we understood that that is actually the technology. Okay, and the technology could be defined in different ways. that, so when you think about an inputs of production, technology has become very important. Okay, technology could be, can be capital, combination of capital, can be human resources. When I say human resources, that's very important now. So what kind of inputs that you're using here is very important, because nowadays you see that human resources is the key to development. Okay, how much education that you earn is the key to your own development. That's why different countries are actually trying to invest more and more in education, so that the returns from education will be seem to be much higher than any other factors of production. So that's why we are actually moving towards, like, if you're looking at the plan period, and we have been investing in heavy industries and things like that. But now, along with these factors of production, we are actually trying to invest more in the, in dealing with the human resources, or raising the human resources. So for an individual also, this is important. If you invest more in education, you will earn a lot. So studying more time, or putting in education first, is actually giving you a lot of returns, right? So this is very important, and this has not been realized for a long time, and now it realizes that probably post Amartya Sen's arguments and all, now it realizes that probably human resources can also be a reason for inequality in the economy, because those who have highly educated economy has a better returns than the other kind of economies. Anyway, that's other discussion that we need to follow. And third question is, who get this? Who's getting this products? That is a problem of distribution. If you look at the Amartya Sen's book on famines in India, the famine, how this has happened in India is mostly because of the distribution problem. Even during the during the availability of food, during the scarcity of foods, we have been exporting part of the food. So it's actually, we have not distributed the resources equally so that it reaches everywhere. Okay, so who get this is also a problem, and it's important to see that who makes this decision, what to produce, how to produce, and who get this, okay? Who should get this. So sometimes it's usually in economics we think that the market makes the best decision. Okay, market means it's actually the decision making in the market, whether the people respond to the prices that the producers put, and the producers actually responding well to the consumer's demand and things like that. So it's demand and supply interaction. I don't know whether we have time to go further into it. Anyway, you learn it in detail, all these things. So there is a market-driven approach, which Adam Smith said it's an invisible hand that works in the market, is something decides who gets and what to produce and how to produce and things like that. Because when you say goods and services, it has a market of its own. When you say how to produce, labor, capital, each and every factor inputs also have their own market. For example, if you look at the nurse market, in Kerala, for example, that's a market, that's a labor market, right? That's for example, doctor's market. So you can perceive everything in terms of a market. So it's an input market, basically. In the other case, we are talking about for example, if you think about TV or phones, it's a product market. So whether the individual divert money to buy a product, how he actually makes decisions, whether it's an individual or a country, it all depends on the maximization of his own happiness. So when you think about sorry, is there a question? You can stop me in between in asking questions. Okay, it's perfectly fine. Here, satisfaction, I mean, for a consumer, what he tries to satisfy here is maximize his utility, maximize his happiness. Okay, for a producer, what he tries to maximize here, maximizing his profit. Okay, so you have to see from both sides how the consumer will become more happy, how the producer becomes happy. When both becomes happy, the market clears. We call it market clears, where the demand and supply interacts each other. Okay, and that's what it talks about, the fundamental questions. So here, what I meant to say is that market is the key thing, and all these questions, what, how, and who, all things could be easily cleared by looking at the price signals. That's what economics talks about. Basic microeconomics is actually talking about, the market is the key. And price is the real variable that answers these questions. If what kind of goods or services to be produced, that you'll get from the price signals of the consumer. Okay, if they are ready to buy that, then they want that product. Okay? How to produce that? It all depends on the price of the inputs, which has the relatively better price. You can use that inputs in the production process. That depends to country to country. Okay, and who gets this? Who has willingness to pay and ability to pay? Okay, that's a definition of the demand. Who makes the demand? They get this product. So what, how, who? All these questions could be easily answered by the market mechanism, that is the demand and supply. Okay, so within this premise, this is the premise of microeconomics works. We can look at some of the important aspects of or fundamentals of microeconomics. Okay, I have not talked about what exactly the microeconomics is, because I thought that I will come into the end and then talk about it. But microeconomics is basically dealing with the human behavior, as I was mentioning, but at the individual unit level, to make you, give you little comfort. I mean, you must be knowing this, but little more familiar to that topic. It's basically the individual choices than looking at the national or larger choices. Okay, so when you look at the particular unit and look at its decision-making choices, then we are dealing with the microeconomics. Okay, so what are the fundamentals here that we are talking about? Which some of them I have already talked about. The first fundamental could be people face trade-offs or choice. Okay, as I mentioned, there is actually a constraint. The constraint is actually the scarcity, very limited resources. So you have to satisfy that resources, and that's why probably sometimes the economics are actually called dismal scientist, because you always have to make a choice. Okay? It's interesting. Sometimes it's called dismal science. We have many discussions on that in the literature. So basically, that means you have very limited resources and unlimited wants. That means you are making a constrained optimization process here. Okay, like I'm sure you might be knowing, in the mathematics we make constrained optimization, right? We make optimal optimization things. How do we actually maximize the impact of a particular factors or goods that we are dealing with? How do we make maximum use out of the resources available? That's a constraint optimization. So in that sense, you can actually link it with physics or engineering or things like that. Okay, so it's a constraint optimization process. That's why in most of the countries, economics is actually a science subject, but in many Indian colleges, you see that it's an art subject. But this kind of debate is going on for a long time, whether economics is very objective or subjective in that sense. Okay, but it's coming more of a mathematical way. Now you see that economics is mostly influenced by the mathematical basis of it. Even microeconomics, you can simply explain it through mathematical way or graphical way or intuitively. I'm trying to make an intuitive sense out of here. Okay? So basically, it's a constraint optimization. So the management of society's resources. How do they manage, and the different societies manage their resources? So particularly, no need to say that there is a trade-off. You should distinguish the term trade and trade-off. Trade-off is actually you are using, you have to choose one thing over the other. When you increase the use of one thing, you have to reduce the use of the other thing because the resources are limited. Okay, so you have to make a trade-off between A and B. If you choose more of A, you have to choose less of B. Okay, so there is a trade-off that always the people have to make a choice, right? So that's always there. And that's a market says. That's a market says. But there are many places. For example, if you think about the developing countries, for example, thinking about education and work, because there are a lot of people who are actually coming from very difficult situation, and they want to get into the labor market as much early as possible so that they can actually get some living. But at the same time, they have to make a choice between education and work, whether to work or study. So the government here interferes. I mean, the government interference importance, I'll talk about it in a while. But government interferes here with something like an incentive here, make people study. The students come to school. That we have universalizing education and things like that. So one idea we do is in the midday meal scheme. Midday meal scheme has been researched quite a lot in terms of an incentive to make children come to school. Okay, so some kind of incentives that government can come in and give so that they can actually lead them to a desirable outcome. Okay? So there is a trade-off which always there. That, as I said earlier, to what you spend more money. If you have friends across around you, then you don't need really more of guns or more of army, right? So then you can actually spend most of your money for productive activities or developing of food or making industries or something like that. So agriculture or industry, you can make a choice. So so there is a trade-off always involved in it, and this necessarily leads to the question of efficiency and equity. Okay, I hope it's clear to you. If you have doubt, please let me know. Okay. Efficiency and equity is a clear outcome of the scarce resources, because efficiency, you're talking about the size of the pie. How efficiently you allocate the resources? What is the size of the pie? And equity is actually talking about how you divide or distribute this different slices of the pie into different population equally, uniformly. I should not say equally, because equal distribution not necessarily leading to an equitable distribution. Okay, equitable distribution is something which is what the particular section of the population or particular individual deserves, he should get that. That's basically we are talking about equity. Some people need more share of the pie to be equal. So that needs to be discussed. So equity is something of a more concern than equality. So how do you actually make the size of the pie, and how do you distribute it equally? That is something which is important in this sense. I'm sure this market, if you're leaving everything to the market, the demand and supply and demand, then there is sometimes can come up with some problems. For example, if I give you an example of eBay trades, you know that eBay's. This is also a form of market. Market is not something which we are actually been confined to the physical kind of market, but eBay's are there. There is a lot of bidding happens on different products. And there is an interesting example. Some years back, eBay has put out a peculiar product for selling. It's a kidney through eBay, and obviously there is a huge demand for that. People started demanding it, and probably it started with some $25,000, and then it went up to $25 million, because at that particular point, the eBay has to literally stop that trading, because it's a shooting up. The price is shooting up. It's a kind of uncontrollable price. Why this is happening? This is mainly because the mismatch between the demand and supply. What is actually the cost of not having a kidney for a person is his life, right? And here a person who wants to sell his kidney, who has two kidneys, he knows that only one kidney is needed for his life. So he wants to share one of his kidneys. And there are a number of people out there to buy that. Okay? And obviously, the eBay's idea is that whoever quotes the biggest price, he will get the kidney. And can you assure that the person who has quoted the highest price is the person who demand or needed it the most? You cannot, right? That's what market says. Market says that the price signal is something important. If you show the high price, you are the person who value the product more. I mean, this is the problem that we talk about the market. You learn about it. So it's basically the person who is ready to pay $25 million. He's actually been saying that I'm ready to pay this because he's able to pay, right? When you talk about demand, it has two parts. Whether you should be able to pay and you should be willing to pay, right? There are many thousands of people out there who are willing to pay but not able to pay. Okay, but the person who is able to pay here wins the race. He gets a kidney. Probably that person can otherwise also live for the next 15, 20 years, but there'll be a person who will be dying tomorrow who doesn't get the kidney if he doesn't get the kidney. So that's possible. right? So whether you can say that this efficiency is there, this is one of the examples that we can think about whether the market transactions are actually efficient or not. So that's why we have a fair argument that the government should be there as a part of this entire process. Okay, so and also this country's trade. I'll come to that country's trade later. Okay, I'll come in a while. So here in economics, so this efficiency, equity, all these things are important. Okay, so that's a basic fundamental one premise that we are looking at. Second premise, you can talk about the opportunity cost. So for example, if I ask you what is the cost of you coming to the women's college and joining this degree, you'll immediately tell me that I pay the fees, I pay the transportation cost. Probably if you're staying in the hostel, you're paying for that. So there are different types of cost that is involved there. So, and you'll tell me that that is actually the accounting cost. That is the cost that you pay directly, right? But there are some costs that you don't pay directly, but you pay indirectly. What is that? For example, your time. You could be somewhere else doing something else, than coming to women's college. That's a foolish argument I'm making, but but I can tell like this, right? You can utilize your time in a different way. Probably you can be if you want to be a singer, you can be singing in some of the you'll be recording your songs than learning economics, right? But you're forced to come here. So something like that. There is a cost of time that is involved. You could have done something next best alternative that you're thinking about. Okay? So in economics, it's not only the accounting cost. The cost you directly pay is important, but the cost that you actually pay, in terms of next best alternative, that is also important. Okay, we call it's basically a kind of indirect cost. We call altogether it's opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of doing that thing is important. The next best alternative, that is foregone. Okay? The foregone next best alternative, that cost is important. When you become scientist later or become an economist later, you'll be asked to do a project analysis. You'll be asked to do a kind of cost benefit analysis, right? Always any economics project or economic scientific projects that is given depends on the cost benefit analysis. So at that time, you have to look at the cost of that project. So when the decision making the units, they'll be thinking about whether to fund this project or project A or B. They'll be making decisions depends upon which one is the better one, right? Depends on its opportunity cost and all. So opportunity cost is very important for an individual, for an economy or anything. Okay? And it's not only accounting cost. We can otherwise call it an economic cost. Economic cost is very relevant in this. So all the decision making in the economics is happening not only based on accounting cost, based on economic cost and opportunity cost. Okay, so I hope that's clear. And now the third fundamental idea in microeconomics or basic economics is the people think at the margin. I mean, this is important to look at one of the examples like water diamond paradox. I'm sure you must have heard about. So if you really look at the need for the people, the utility of the product, obviously you'll say that water is more useful because without water you cannot live, right? But you pay nothing for the water, basically. You pay very little for the water, but you pay huge for the diamond, right? Diamond is not that useful other than some kind of a, off that it's there. The value that you're giving to the diamond and water is totally different. Water is actually a life-saving product, right? Even then, you're paying very less for the water and more for the diamond. Okay. So this is basically because the people really think at the margin, for getting each additional product, how much you have to pay. That's what the people is really concerned about. Here, the getting each additional unit of water is not really difficult because the supply is quite larger than the demand at some part of the world. Okay, I'm talking about some part of the world where water is invented. Okay, so where the supply is much more than the demand. That's why you are actually paying quite less. But in the case of diamond, if you think at the margin, this is actually having quite a lot of cost involved in getting the additional. So this kind of water diamond paradox has been kind of struggling the Economist, including Adam Smith, for quite a long time to explain how this. They try to explain through the labor theory of Marx and things like that, but what they really understood later is actually because the people really think at the margin. So in economics, when you really so you must be learning quite a lot of terms like diminishing marginal utility, marginal benefits and marginal cost and things like that, because all these actually decide how much product you actually demand over time. Because when you have more of a commodity, you actually have less marginal utility of it. You will demand less and less. Okay, that's a diminishing marginal utility. When you have less of a product, you feel that I want more of it.
Sir, could you please?
Yeah. Please tell me.
Sir, could you please repeat the last point?
Yeah, this is actually people really think at the margin. That's a basis in economics. Okay, where you see that the marginal utility, for example, if you think about, when you have more of a commodity, you are actually ready to exchange it for another commodity. Okay, I mean, you learn it when you learn indifference curves and all, because I cannot explain everything here. That's why I kind of go a little fast here. But basically, the idea is this: when you have more of a commodity, you have less value for it. When you have less of a commodity, you have more value for it. So, I mean, I'm talking about not the entire product per se, but the additional unit. Okay, if you have more of a product, you want less and less of the additional product unit of it. When you have less of a product, you want more and more additional unit of it. So that's a kind of paradox always existing there, because it's mainly because when you have more of a product, you actually have a larger utility gain from it. For example, if you have seen 5 movies, so seeing the 6th movie, you are not much interested because you have not much, you don't see much utility in it. Okay, because you're already tired of seeing movies. So you would like to exchange movies for something else. Okay, so that kind of marginal thinking is always there. The people kind of shift between the commodities because it depends on its availability. Okay, and I'm sure, don't worry about it. And I mean, you learn it because this is one of the very important aspect of economics. And I hope it's clear at some point. I mean, if you have doubts, we can talk about it. And then people respond to incentives. This is important. Okay. I mean, incentives are crucial in analyzing how market works. For example, when the Apple's prices rises, people demand less. When Apple's prices goes down, people demand more. So it's kind of demand and price and demand works in certain inverse relations here. And sometimes if you give more incentives, people actually kind of buy that product. In festival seasons, you see that kind of how people respond to different incentives. In like that, for example, you must have known that recently, I mean, sometime back, Thomas Isaac has introduced fat tax. Fat tax is actually tax on various fast foods. This is basically that when you actually increase the price of that commodity, people have less incentive to buy that. So to reduce the consumption of those kind of commodities. So we use these kind of ideas in taxations. So in budget, like petrol prices we increase, even though it doesn't reduce much. It all depends on the elasticity aspect. And elasticity is basically how do we respond to the price changes. That's what elasticity talks about. Elasticity is an important aspect of microeconomics, which has a lot of usages, especially in taxes. For example, you see that in every budget they increase the tax of cigarettes, right? Why they increase the tax of cigarettes? Because they want people to use less and less of it. And because of its specific character of elasticity, demand responsiveness, the government will not lose money there. You will learn that later, because the people really don't respond much to the price increase in the cigarettes and some other kind of commodities. If they are addicted, they kind of keep continuing doing it. So very few people will be kind of quit this if the price increases. So what happens in a way that government actually increases their revenue by increasing the price, and also the demand will not go down because people anyway will buy it. Okay, that's why you choose some products to really pay the higher taxation in different budgets. Okay, so how microeconomics, the idea of elasticity has been utilized in budgeting and things like that. It's very important. This is quite applicable even in the health insurance part, for example. where the premium, how they decide the premiums. It all depends on the age structure, and things like that, right? The old age people have to pay more premiums because of the, probability of having an illness. So this all depends on the kind of elasticity. It all depends on how many episodes of illness you have, how many visits you make in the hospital. So the premium has, health insurance is one of the very interesting example how some of the techniques of um, uh, microeconomics have been used in real world. Okay. So this I'm not really going to explain, but basically it says that the market is the usually good way to organize economic activity. That's what microeconomics premise is. But we can actually not always the supply and demand can decide the actual price. You see in this particular, I hope you will be able to see this, right? Here you see that the curve where the supply and demand curve interacts. 30 is the equilibrium price, and 3000 is the quantity that actually the equilibrium that reaches, the demand and supply interaction. This is the market clearing price 30, market clearing quantity is 3000. And anything below it would lead to a kind of shortages and create distinction, and create problems in the market, right? So economics always says that the market decides, clears itself. You have to freely ask the stakeholders to interact in the market. That's why we call it invisible hand works. Adam Smith called it an invisible hand that works, which clears the market. Okay, but that's the basic premise in which the government the economics decision has been made. Okay. And there is a concern that government can sometimes improve market outcomes. That's why we have something like a public economics. You must have heard public economics actually looking at the role of government in economics. So we don't say that always actually the market can create an efficient outcome. As we have seen in the case of kidney, where it's not always going to the person who really needed it somewhere. So the government need to come here and improve the actual outcome here. How the government can actually contribute to improve the outcome. That's very important. For example, that there are some products like roads and bridges where the private parties will not be interested because the cost of producing it is too large. Also, for example, if you think about, there's a village and the village has only one well, and if everybody is allowed to use it, then there is a problem, right? It's sometimes this creates a huge chaos there, right? Because everybody will try to use it. Like that, particular road. Why do we have traffic rules? The rules are, there is a particular kind of behavior pattern that we need to follow there. And like that, in some commodities, production of commodities, the market cannot provide that commodity because the cost of producing is so much, where the government needs to interfere, okay? Like heavy investment, something like that. Another problem is that if you leave everything to the market, it can also create some problems like environmental problems. If you allow the industry to work its own will, then actually it creates a lot of noise pollution, wastages and things like that, environmental hazards. Okay. And these kind of things can come up if you leave everything to the market, where a kind of equal distribution of resources may not be possible. That's our problem. There the government needs to intervene. How the government intervenes? The government can intervene with various things. You must have heard about support pricing, right? For the farmers, sometimes support price is necessary. If they don't get enough price for their commodity to produce, then they will be at a loss. So the government interferes and provide a support price. And minimum wage, for example. Now there is a huge hue and cry about, the nurses' minimum wage should be increased. The government can interfere and say that 25,000 or 30,000 is the minimum pay for the nurses. Then it's good because they will be getting it. Otherwise, since there is large number of people are ready to work as nurses, the supply is more than demand. There is a possibility that the wage will be going down much below 10,000, right? So that's the case everywhere. So how the government can officially interfere in providing a minimum wage or a basic support price, and that creates some kind of affordability here. Okay, so that's why the government's intervention in microeconomics is important, and we we consider that as something important, and that is a specific area we call it public economics. Okay, and another idea is trade can make things better. Okay, I mean, this is a very simple logic, because if each country is allowed to produce their own special products, if they can produce at a very low cost, obviously these countries should specialize in their own production. Then you produce much more than what you needed, and then you exchange it each other. Then probably everybody will be at a better situation, right? So this, I mean, there are different theories in trade, absolute and comparative advantage and error, but basically the idea is this. So specialization can leads to a better production process. That's why we have, the large products in the world like cars and all. Now, different parts of these products are being produced at different parts of the world, right? If you look at the Barbie doll's hair is coming from one place, its silk clothing is coming from somewhere, its a basic, a shoe is coming from somewhere. So this is actually one of the interesting examples for the globalized kind of product, which actually looks at the minimum cost for different products. In the new research analysis, we call it a kind of commodity chain approach. The commodities are actually it's a chain, that works in the production process. The chain will lead to the production of a final product, but the chain's link will be in different countries. That's a new mode of production. That's a newer kind of version of the new trades. Okay, so these are all important. I'm coming to the close of this, maybe next 2 minutes. So these are the basic premises in which we actually try to understand economics, and this actually helps us in getting a correct picture about how things work. These are all abstract things. We can actually make abstract hypotheses from these things. So that could be very theoretical economics, but we can actually put this in use in understanding slight changes from these kind of aspects. If there is a change in this market hypothesis, how the market works, that's how the models work, right? So we make different models based on these various human behavioral analysis. Okay, and we put into use in the economy and see that how that works. And that's why we have different types of market, competitive market and things like that you will learn later. Okay, so as Adam Smith has been pointing out, this invisible hand is quite important. But on the corollary, I mean, if you think about how the government can actually intervene, but the economists argue that government can actually distort things. But there are many economists who argue that it's not. The government can actually be interestingly intervene in many parts, right? For example, in the communist countries where it's not the market decides the prices, it's the central planning authority, like for a long time in China and Cuba, they have been deciding it. Okay? But now the China has moved on to the market economy to see that there are inefficiency even under the those kind of regimes. So it doesn't mean that market economy is perfect. There are problems, much bigger problems. That's why we have government intervention after the post 1990s liberalization period, where the government interventions, importance of government interventions are actually increasing, right? Like in terms of providing targeted policies like poverty alleviation programs, Manrega, the employment guarantee schemes, and direct transfer of money. There are a lot of ways that by which the government intervenes. And Professor Mathiasen also talking about it. If you look at the Abhijit Banerjee, Professor Abhijit Banerjee's work, it's quite interesting to see that how efficiently we can actually tackle the the problems by looking at the experimental economics aspect, by connecting the data from the field, and how do we actually link it each other, and we can try that. So in a basic sense, I try to distinguish between micro and macro here. So microeconomics actually studies very individual parts of the economy. Individual could be a household or a firm or a country. It depends on in what context that you use. Okay, so it's basically studies how the individual parts of the economy make decisions to allocate the limited resources. While it can be about the individual prices or the different factors of production and its weaknesses and strength. All these will be covered. Different market types, all these will be covered in microeconomics, and the efficiency coming from that. And while the macro is actually dealing with much more larger idea of inflation, the employment problems, and larger production levels at a larger level. It's a larger macro level. So in that sense, if you look at the application of microeconomics, it gets into everything in economics, all fields of economics like health, finance, industry, environment, engineering, everything. Okay. So you also know that there is health economics, there is environmental economics, there is industrial economics. All these fields are actually making use of microeconomic theories at its best. Okay. That would be quite interesting to see how they use it. You will learn it quite a while when you go into MA, masters and things like that. And what I meant to say is that the idea of market, the idea of market powers like supply and demand, the with the basic assumption that people are actually rational in dealing with these ideas, they are actually there is a rationality that is involved in making decisions. We actually make understanding about various aspects of microeconomics. But at the same time, if the people are not rational, then also, as we have mentioned in the beginning, the behavioral economics analysis will bound rationality studies will talk about if what happens if the human beings really not have full information about market situation. How do they respond to it? With the partial information, how do they respond to it? So we have many expanding fields now, which looks at kind of relaxing one by one assumptions. We can see how this works. So I stop here. Probably if you have questions, I can take it up. But I hope I have given you some idea about this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was a very good session. So now the floor is open. If you want to ask anything, you can ask. Please unmute the mic. You can also put your question.
Sorry, Parvati, I am not able to hear you. If you have any questions or any problems in understanding, you can ask me. I'm sure there'll be a lot of issues because I've been talking quite fast. But if you can always come back to me if you don't want to ask, don't want to raise questions now, because Rejith has my contacts. I'm happy to answer any of your questions now or later. Not about only this, but any about any other things. I'm open to questions even. Please. Was it useful? I hope it is, right?
Yes, sir, yes. It was very useful.
Thank you.
If anybody has a question, then they can ask or can in the chat box.
Yeah, sure. You can put it in the chat box also.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, in the presentation, I had seen that about water and diamond paradox.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what is that paradox? Water and diamond paradox.
So when you think about water and diamond, if you go by the demand, basically water is something that you demand a lot, right? Even though water is something that you need as a life-saving, water is quite useful for life anyway. You need to use it. But diamond is not that useful compared to water. Even then, you are ready to pay high for or more for the diamond than for water. Okay. So why is it happening in the real world? So that kind of question has been pondering around in the economics circle for a long time. Okay, and earlier the idea was thinking about it's creating value and things like that. But later it's understood that we need to see that perspective of demand and supply comparison, because water is abundant in supply even if it is demand, but diamond is not really abundant, right? And it actually has a cost which is involved in production process for the diamond. So in that sense, when you think in terms of the marginal benefit or marginal cost of getting a particular additional unit of, for example, 1 unit of water or 1 unit of diamond, obviously the cost of getting a diamond is much costlier. for usual customers, right? That's why they are actually highly costly. So this actually try to explain the the interplay of demand and supply. So basically, it says that when you try to analyze the market, you also have to see in comparison in relation with what is the demand and supply for the particular. That's what it's trying to explain. So another
Okay,
suggestion
sir.
he has been writing about,
So there's a question in the chat box.
yeah,
Big amount of
big
divergence between reality and economic theories, especially traditional economic theories. So what's your opinion about this? Question is by Nakasugasmi.
no, the basic principles of economics is always useful because even though it's working with a lot of assumptions, like if you think about market or any other theories, it's basically working with a lot of assumptions. But at the same time, relaxing one by one assumptions, you can actually try to understand in reality how the situation works. Okay, how the situation emerges. So I'm sure that the economic models have been quite useful in understanding or predicting the economic or financial analysis over time. But the importance of different theories have been kind of changing over time. For example, the Micro's idea of market economy has been in peril during the 1930s depression, where they thought that no, we need government intervention, more intervention during the Great Depression, where the government can come in and pull in a lot of money to the economy. Sorry, push a lot of money into the economy so that people have a lot of money in their hand. They will start demanding more and more commodities so that the employment will improve and hence the economy will get a kickstart. Okay, so the idea is that who will make this initial investment or initial push? The government has to make. So the idea of more of macro kind of analysis has been becoming more important. Okay? So basically, of course, there is a divergence, but at the same time, this modeling, like any other modeling, will help us to understand something close to reality, and that will help us to solve the issues later. I mean, I'm sure there are people who have predicted the financial crisis. Raghuram Rajan has actually been talking about the crisis in the world financial crisis in 2008 for a long time. Okay, so that's been there. So I hope that but still these theories are quite useful, and now we are actually getting more close to reality by if you are following the last Nobel Prize, we are actually working on the data which is coming from the field. Okay, but more and more usefulness of economics is coming in terms of the development aspects, its growth aspects, its environmental understanding, in different fields of health and industry and all. So I don't think that even if there is a slight divergence, this is not really useful. It's very much useful. Yeah, sure. You can put the questions in the box. Nagaswasini, it's okay. Is it satisfying my answer or? Thank you.
So can you give an introduction about development economics?
That will be quite big. I mean, that takes a lot of time. This is something that's totally a different area that we need to understand, because the idea of development itself has been changing. There's quite a lot of debate about that over time, because the role of Amartya Sen and all coming in that, whether we need to see development as something just an increase in the level of wealth or level of income, or increase in the access to resources. We talked about choices here, right? How do we make a correct choices? So the Amartya Sen explained in terms of the capabilities to access these commodities. What is the entitlement that people have in terms of accessing these commodities? Whether the role of the government is to actually provide this better capability set so that the people can actually achieve various products at their will. So, and Bhutan has come up with happiness index. So there are different ideas of development has been going on, because development is a very interesting field where we really need to analyze the issues of poverty, inequality, and the issues of distribution and things like that, because this is particularly useful for us, because um, as a developing country, we are kind of moving out. But as a developing countries, we are actually been dealing with various issues in economics. But most of these microeconomics theories you can use in understanding how that helps the in development, economic development, whether in terms of its material development or in terms of its outcome. Okay, it's a bigger topic. Probably at some point of time, I'm happy to come to the come online and have a small lecture on that also. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thank you,
Hello,
sir.
sir.
Yeah, Anupama.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, you
Sir,
are.
sir, I heard that microeconomics is very necessary or it's a basics to learn what is macroeconomics.
Yeah.
But sir, as a beginner, I understand what microeconomics, sir, but I personally feel it as more complex that we have to analyze the basic things and each and every part of the market and it I feel very complex to connect it with the real world, sir. And and I also heard that it is necessary for us to learn macroeconomics, sir. So is there any idea for us to happily joyfully learn microeconomics and compare it with the real world? So it will be very useful,
Um,
sir. I personally
Anupama,
feel it very
I
complex.
think yes, I understand. But basically, microeconomics is actually the fundamental to everything, even for macroeconomics. You need to understand the basic theories because that's where, because it start from an individual, okay? Because microeconomics is dealing with an individual's behavior towards different things. If there is a limitation of resources, how does he make choices? How does he reveal his preferences? How doesn't he reveal his preferences? There are different basic premises in which the individual make a decision. And obviously, there is a fallacy of composition that we always talk about. Not always the individual parts will add up to the whole, that is there. But at the same time, this will help us to understand how overall the different households, if you're thinking about how the different households will respond. For example, if there is a policy that, suddenly we want to raise some money from the market for the government decides that, okay, I will increase the taxation for lottery or taxation for, something like cigarettes or something like that. Okay, some particular commodity that won't, they're raising the taxation or price of that. And how does that impact on the overall economy, in terms of its demand, its supply availability? How does it actually contribute to the overall income of the, that particular state? This all has to be considered, right? So basic microeconomics premise is actually been considering most macroeconomic decision making. For example, employment. If you think about the employment, what level of wage rate is actually desirable? What is the willingness to pay to be employed? So these all needs to be understood if you actually need to have a proper employment policy. What is the rate of return of education, for example, if you need to know what kind of education policy you require? So any kind of macro decisions that you take, it totally depends upon the micro principles that it underlies. So in that sense, I think that microeconomics is more interesting. I think if you feel that this is difficult, I think that might be because you're not quite familiar with the things, and I think different universities in
I
Indian structure,
can't connect it with the real world, sir. I can connect and compare it with the surroundings and the real world, sir. In the macroeconomics, we all are happening around us, sir. Like the marketing, money and banking, and etc. So and so are happening around us, sir. But the micro is basically theory and the complex things, so
no,
we
but it
cannot
is
really.
closely connected, Anupama. If you're talking about various macroeconomic issues, whether it's banking or anything, you are able to connect it to the real world because it is talking about the real world. It's mostly the application of microeconomics. It's talking about the real world, but that doesn't have an existence without understanding the basic premise in which those relations works. You will get to know about those relations only from the microeconomics. Okay, because if you
Okay.
learn macroeconomics without micro, you will understand your inability to understand most of those things. When you hear about banking or when you hear about employment, when you hear about inflation, you will suddenly feel that, oh, this is something which I know because, I see it every day. That's why you feel it like that. But if you actually go try to
Yes.
understand why there is a price level increase or why there is a pricing structure, why this kind of pricing structure we follow, this all has a microeconomic principles behind that. To understand that how the real world works, you need to go back to the microeconomic theories, even though it's an abstract sense. When I say abstract sense, it's not simply very hypothetical. It's actually close to reality. For example, you can argue that when I say competitive market, you can say that there is no competitive market in existence. At the same time, if you relax one by one assumptions which suit to the market that is available in different countries, you will be able to come across oligopoly. That is the game theoretical model which uses, right? How do different firms behave in different pricing level? How do different firms use different strategies to win the market? How do monopolists work? Why they are pricing more? For example, how you can simply connect it to the existing situation. How the Geo has actually got the market. They came out with a very low price for internet and phone, and they got the market. You think that they will remain as it is like this? Once they chunk out all the other competitors, they will
No,
actually
sir.
increase their price. Obviously, that's a market, right? So you'll understand that how this competitive strategies works. So I think that the basic, I can go on talking
Yes,
about
sir.
various examples, but basically, probably if you have more time sometime later, we can actually have a discussion on this. This is important, but obviously I understand that it's slightly complex, but theoretical models are always.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Sir, I have a question. As a beginner, I don't know how correct is the question or whether it is applicable or not. When there is a crisis, the cause and effect of that crisis won't be instantaneous on people. Like different people react with different pace, and when the effect is complete on almost all people in the economy or society, either that crisis can be deteriorating or it can be a little more what to say a little more it will be finished by that time. So when we formulate something considering all people, if even if they have not reacted to that crisis, if the situation is becoming more difficult or if it is not becoming more worse, then how will we formulate policies at that time?
It's not like that all the issues are actually coming something new. We have, that's why we have a lot of, that's why we say that a lot of history is actually sometimes useful to look at what is the past experiences, right? And, that's one thing. You learn from the past and you formulate policies, whether it is economic policy or any kind of policies, that's important. And if it's a new thing, then probably you need to experiment, right? Probably, that's why we need to see that the prediction level of economic variables. And nowadays we are actually, even though we say that it's actually basically it depends on the human behavior, many of the economic variables we are able to predict. How consumers, we have data on various things. That's why we say that data is very important, collecting from various ideas. So if you look at the data, you can see that how the different variables are actually responding to a change, a particular change that you're talking about, whether that variable is responding positively or negatively. By analyzing or extrapolating all these kind of quantitative understanding, we would be able to, make a reasonably well modeling so that that issue could be solved. And in most of the crisis times, that has helped us. Most of the economic crisis or stock market crisis times, it has helped us. So in Argentinian crisis, actually, we know that it's actually what creates a problem. It's a stock market that has been draining over time. The market, the money which has been flowing out. So we know that what is the repercussion of having a full capital of fully liberalized economy in capital account. You learn all these things when I talk about it. So each and every impact of each variables, we have fair idea, but the new variables we will learn in course. Of course, you are right. We will not be able to make a completely accurate model because it's all about human behavior, right? This is also about human behavior. That's why we have a confusion whether this is still a science, because it cannot be right everywhere. Can be right most of the places, but may not be right everywhere. That's because it's totally depends on the human behavior. Unlike science, it is not true everywhere. Sometimes that's possible. I agree with you. But at the same time, we'll be fairly able to make a decent observation regarding the looking at the data to extrapolate and make predictions. I hope.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir. I'm Aparna. I want to ask you a question. Sir,
Aparna, go on, please.
can you please give a short description on welfare economics and its scope in the coming year?
I think welfare economics have a lot of importance, because if you look at after post 1990s, you see that most of the development projects, the idea of development has been improving quite a lot with the welfare ideas, because that's very important. Because the post stabilization period, you see that the largely we depend upon the trickle down policy, right? The large growth will give the economic benefits to all, over time. That's the idea behind it. How far the trickle down really go into various sections, this is, we don't know. But we have a fair understanding now, looking at the data, saying that this kind of liberal policies are able to reduce poverty, but in many countries it is actually increasing inequality. Okay, so in this kind of context, I think the welfare economics have quite a lot of interesting importance. The contribution of Amartya Sen is quite laudable in this. He has been talking about the various comparisons of Kerala. If you have read that book about the development as freedom, he's actually been talking about Kerala, Sri Lanka, and some other states who have been following the very welfare kind of policies over time, has reflected or responded quite well to these kind of post-industrial, post-liberalized kind of systems, where they are quite the fundamentals of these economies are quite good in terms of dealing with, because human development that has been coming from investments in welfare activities, it's quite huge. So I think that this is quite relevant. As long as there is market economy, the welfare economics is also very important, because the government's role will also be increasing, right? I can give you many examples on this, but I hope that there'll be new implementations of aspects of welfare economics has to be seen. We see that behavioral economics is actually important, because now we see that not all the human beings have the full information about everything. Whether the existing market is providing them actual information to act upon positively or not. These kind of questions are coming up. So providing data, providing better information, providing different types of welfare policies, these all become important, because the government has a huge role.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Please explain proof of
Megha, I'm not able to hear you.
question in the chat. Can you explain the proof of these macroeconomics?
Is there any more questions? Because I'm not able to hear Megha properly. I hope if there is any, shall I take more questions, or we wind up?
I'm
Sir,
so
there's a
sorry.
question in the.
So there is a question in the chat box.
Yeah. Globalization enables workers to move more freely.
Can you?
Therefore, some countries find it difficult to hold their best skilled laborers. The economic growth of that country declines. This is very important. I mean, migration, brain drain, all these are very important aspects now. Because as I said earlier, now, I mean, there is a theory called, Lewis model, which talks about the free movement of factors of production depends on, the cost and its earnings. But here, in the globalization, this is the important aspect. Here, there is a lot of movement between the, laborers to other countries, and even the production networks has been spreading quite a wide in the globalized area. I mean, as you see that, the people will definitely look beyond their geographical boundaries for job. That's for sure. It's not that economic growth of that country declines. I mean, for example, if you take the case of Kerala, you know, um, you know that probably we are one of the very foremost globalized region in the world in terms of its free movement of labor to other places, looking at jobs. I hope that even now our economy is 20%, 20 to 24% is actually being contributed by the income that is coming from abroad. So I mean, it all depends on what kind of, I hope I don't know whether you know about the demographic dividend. There is a term. So it depends, all depends on what kind of workforce you have, what kind of age structure of population you have. So it depends on the age, on that age population. If the people are able to work more, whether in the domestic market or abroad, they can actually contribute more to the economy. So obviously this has an implication, but it all depends on how much workforce you have and also how much dependence you have. Okay? In that sense, India is actually at a very better stage where we actually have the 15 to 64, the age group, that particular workforce age group is quite large. So we expect that we have a quite a lot of demographic dividend that is coming from the recent the future activities or future economic dealings. And China has just passing that stage. So I think that this is important because it depends on context wise whether the the skilled laborers moving abroad can actually send in a lot of money back to the economy. At the same time, if the countries are able to legitimize their schemes in such a way that they can attract the population who has gone out, the brain that has gone out back to their country, they'll be able to gain, definitely. So it depends on the context, but this is actually important. There's a lot of research going on in this movement of, of people, especially you see that there is a lot of nurses, semi-skilled people and highly skilled people are actually moving to different parts of the world nowadays. A lot of Philippine nurses have been working in Europe. A lot of Indian nurses are working in UK, and a lot of software engineers in other places. So this is all important. How this has been made used by the different country depends on their migration policies and population policies. Of course, it has. That's an important area of research. There is a person called Professor Irudai Rajan, who has been doing quite a lot of research in Center for Development Studies on this, on migration, skilled migration and non-skilled migration. So if you look at the working papers of Center for Development Studies, you will find n number of studies on this. So Gopika has a question. So can you please explain the impact of microeconomics on behavior? No, actually, it's not the impact, Gopika. I'm not an expert in behavioral economics, but basically, microeconomics actually, live with some of the assumptions. Where the basic assumption we have is, the consumer, the people are rational. Okay? And but at the same time, there's a possibility that the rationality all depends on how do you become rational in a particular point. Rationality depends on the information available to you. So it depends on the information available to you. You make decisions, right? For example, if you want to buy iPhone, you look at its specifications, right? You look at saying that they are using a different operating system, and I'm giving a very simple example from an individual point of view. So they're looking at specifications. You see that how long that works. What is the better procedure? Sorry, it's functioning than the other kind of phones they have. So you will choose for it even if the price is so high, right? So that depends on the information that is available to you. Like that, for an economy, to avail a scheme or to be involved in a production process, the individual or the household or a firm need to have full information about things, right? If that is not available, there is a bounded rationality that will be there working. Okay, the rationality will be limited, depends on the availability of information. So in that sense, how the different stakeholders can behave in a different way. For example, oligopoly. Oligopoly is a market structure where you don't really know that how your rival will be placing the product, for example, or how your rival will be framing the strategies, right? So there you have to make an assumption. They will be kind of coming up with this kind of innovative models, or they will be coming with this pricing. So I'll be responding to that. As a competitor, I will be responding to that. So this behavioral kind of economics, both in individual sense and firm-wise or a nationwide, this is actually quite interesting. This is a new area which has been developing quite now. We have been giving, I think there's a novel place has been given to behavioral economics quite recently. But I'm not an expert in it, probably, yeah, but in different ways this has been useful. Gobika, if you're in.
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, I can.
Sir, can you please explain the micro foundations of macroeconomics? It's a question by Parvati.
I think I have explained it in various questions, answering through that. That's why I skipped that question, Parvati. I think I have given it in various points, how the micro foundations, these all foundations, the fundamentals that I have been talking is actually contributing to the, the macroeconomic overall idea. But when I mentioned that, I also mentioned that there is a possibility of fallacy of composition. It's not that always the individual will add up to the whole. Not always the individual behavior will be something representing their national interest. That's possible. So, but at the same time, we actually go with the assumption that the individuals are actually rational and works on the basic premises that I've been talking about, the 7 points which I've been talking about. Those are actually the foundations of microeconomics, which could be become the fundamentals of even the working of the economy or the larger units. That's why I didn't explain it. I have mentioned it already. But there's quite a lot of things to talk about. We can have that discussion in some other point possible.
Okay, sir. If anybody has any other question.
Thank you. This is really interesting. I mean,
or can we conclude? So if anybody has some questions, they can please put it on the chat box if there is any net problems.
Otherwise, you can, I'll just write my email here.
Okay, sir.
Send me these questions if you. This is my email ID, institutional email ID. If you have any questions, any doubts, or any other concerns in economics you want to raise, you want to discuss some of the research issues. I think some of the MA students also here in this platform, master students, if they want to discuss any other issues, I'm always open. Okay, you can reach me at this email. I'm happy to respond.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you for sparing some time for us. I think now we can conclude as the time is 8:30. So I would like to welcome Janaky ma'am for the vote of thanks. Ma'am.
Thank you, Megha. Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Thank you, Megha. Let me take this opportunity to express my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Harilal M.S for being with us today and for meticulously explaining concepts of microeconomics with such ease. Thank you, sir, for vividly demonstrating how interesting the subject can get. And as Ganasree teacher rightly pointed out at the very beginning, microeconomics is fundamental in understanding the discipline of economics. Today's gathering, as you know, the first year students are yet to explore the expanse of economics. Thank you, sir, for giving us that much needed head start in this discipline. And as I read in a Facebook post, your academic trajectory is incredibly inspiring. Your journey from Karyavatam to CDS and then Paris and then Vienna is a dream journey for any student of economics. I'm sure most of our students have already been motivated by that. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us today. Let me also extend my most sincere thanks to Uma teacher. I know this is a kind of awkward thanking her, but still, she's a pillar of strength. She hems all the programs conducted by our department. Thank you so much, ma'am. And I'm also grateful to Professor Rejith, a very dear friend and colleague. Thank you, sir, for helping us organize this webinar. And my heartiest gratitude to Ganasree teacher for helping us organize this webinar again, a dear friend and colleague. And a big shout out to my dear students. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think it's time for us to conclude our webinar. I heartily convey my gratitude to each and everyone who gathered here to attend the webinar. I hope everyone get benefited from this. Now you can cut the call. Thank you so much for being with us.